Our next speaker is Dr. V. Niskama Shanta. And Dr. Shanta received his PhD in Coastal Hydrodynamics from Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. And Dr. Shanta did his postdoc at the Korea Ocean Research and Development Center, and he published numerous papers in international and national conferences and journals like Springer Link and Communicative and Integrative Biology. And he is also a main organizer of this conference, Science and Scientist series. And he's a Vaishnava monk, and currently he's a Sevaite-President-Acharya of Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mutt in Narashimapalli, Nabadwip Dham, West Bengal, India. The topic of his talk is understanding the Vedantic view on the difference between life and non-life. I request to Dr. Shanta, please begin your talk.
Thank you, Dr. Sumangala, for your kind introduction to this insignificant self. So let me share my presentation. So we want to discuss something about understanding the Vedantic view on the difference between life and non-life. From the modern scientific point of view, actually the concept of life is generally understood from non-life. As scientists, they try to understand in past also from the concept of various ideas about how life would have come up from non-life, heterogenesis and abiogenesis. And many great personalities like Newton, Harvey, and others, they believed that life must have, it can arise from rotten meat, which is being disproven by Francisco Reed by his simple explanation from, putting the meat inside the jar and covering it with one jar kept open, and other two jars he covered with the screen and airtight. And there he proved that there are some insects which are coming and laying the eggs, and it is established the concept that life comes from life. Life does not come from non-life. And the same idea is also established by Louis Pasteur by his experiment, the famous experiment, Swan neck flask experiment. And he has made a statement, never will the doctrine of spontaneous generation recover from this mortal blow of simple experiment. But somehow scientists, they are come up with an idea, yes, life is always coming from life, but somehow first life arisen from non-life. And they've tried to find out different mechanism and principles, and give ideas about how chemicals must have evolved. And there are some chance combination of so-called building blocks forming, as Miller tried to demonstrate by his experiments. But all these experiments, it is being established that there is some intelligence which was necessary to even produce the necessary so-called building blocks of life. And because what is the energy that producing those molecules, and have the capacity to also destroy that. So even to produce those molecules, Miller has to use his intelligence. So the concept of cell as or the simplest form of life, as it was perceived in the time of Darwin, later on given a very complex picture. So cell is not just some molecules, they are complex molecules. They were lying, and they can by chance combine and produce the kind of phenomena that is being observed at the present time, or what the scientists are reporting. Even the smallest cell equally, it presents extreme complexity beyond the imagination of the mechanistic or chemical ideas that we employ in our laboratories to produce something closer to that complexity that we observe in the living context. And this was one of the picture which is being published in the journal of I think Nature, biochemist David Deamer, and he was doing some experiments in 2005 by pouring some chemicals to see if life can arise by waiting for certain time. And he could conclude that life cannot come from that type of process from his experiments. And this is the idea my spiritual master Srila Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj has given to one of the scientists that I have talked about, the Miller, when he was giving a talk in one of the university where Dr. Singh was doing his postdoctorate. So Dr. Miller was asking some funds for producing so-called building blocks of life, so that in future he will produce the life from those building blocks. So what Dr. Singh asked him, if I supply you those molecules, can you produce life? Then Dr. Miller told that I don't know. That means we are doing so much of research without even understanding whether the outcome of that research will support our claim. That is the main thing people are forgetting. As Srila Bhaktivedanta Puri Maharaj, the chairman of this conference, has written in one of the discussions in our e-group in 2010, Sadhu Sangha e-group, he has written, anyone can take a single cell and put it into a sterile test tube with all the necessary ingredients to sustain its life. If you then puncture that cell with a sterile needle, the contents of the cell will pour out into the solution. Even if you wait for hundreds of years, life will not be generated from those original biochemicals of the cell. This tells us that life is not simply cellular in nature. The life principle is the a priori formative cause of the cell or the body of any multicellular creature. We can see this in action by watching any seed or egg or embryonic zygote go through its development to maturity. Science cannot explain this development by simply reference to chemical activity. So reductionistic ideology always failed to explain two simple questions. What is the minimum number of parts that are essential for a living organism to survive? By what mechanism do these parts get assembled together? Here we can see for a mechanical machine, we can tell these answers very easily. But for an organism, as we are trying to give a mechanical image, the persons who are claiming they could never provide any answer to these simple questions. So some humility is necessary in science, and to accept the truth as it is coming up from the experiments and evidence is the what you can say true nature of a rational being. Actually, as Immanuel Kant told way back in 1784, there will never be a Newton for the blade of grass. And the same thing is emphasized by our director, Srila Bhaktivedanta Puri Maharaj, by stating that all the science and the scientists in the world together cannot make a single blade of grass. So, first thing is that the life, the idea that first life came from non-life, that is never being demonstrated by any verifiable evidence. Only what is being supplied is some narrative or the stories. And also the concept that how the biodiversity manifested in this world, that idea itself is self-defeating in nature. As Darwin himself was doubting, Darwin was seriously concerned about the philosophical implications of his dogma, as is very clear from his own statement. With me, the horrid doubt always arises whether the convictions of man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of the lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Could anyone trust in the convictions of a monkey's mind, if there are any conviction in such a mind? Darwin's objective evolution theory fails to provide a practical pathway to guarantee that humans develop trustworthy true beliefs about reality. as it is coming up from the statement of Francis Crick. Our highly developed brains, after all, were not evolved under the pressure of discovering scientific truth, but only to enable us to be clever enough to survive and leave descendants. So from this idea itself, we can know that if we support the Darwinian view of evolution and their followers, then it is very difficult to believe the concept of science, because science is practiced not for establishing truth, but to have survival advantage. So this is one of the interesting thing that Darwinists must also focus and address. And the criticizers about the philosophy and religions, as we know, Richard Dawkins, he tried to say that the people with religious beliefs, they have mental virus. So this type of harsh statements towards other fields who are trying to explore life and non-life and the origin is seems to be irrational. So these scientists forget that the very foundation of science is based upon humans having trustworthy and true beliefs about reality, and how that is coming up from this self-defeating concept that Darwin has proposed and his believers are following. The concept of the tree of life, which Darwin provided, and he thought that it will be supported in future by evidence from the fossil data, and genetic data was not so evident in his time, and later on scientists tried to also match genetic tree and the fossil tree, and what they found out, it is not a tree, it is the forest of life. So there are various kinds of trees they try to construct from various evidences from molecular biology and from the fossil data, and they found a lot of mismatch in that idea, and it is very difficult to establish the simple idea that one organism give rise to another, and like that some tree can be found. So all the organisms, they are interrelated to each other as far as genetic evidence is concerned. And the what you can say, the proof when it is being supplied to the public to support the idea of evolution of the bodies, generally the adaptive changes are referred. There is this microevolution, so-called microevolution is referred, but the macroevolution, the big changes, they have been never been found or supported by empirical evidence. As in one of the published paper, Dr. Kuhn stated, several of the textbooks continue to incorrectly promote the debunked Miller-Urey origin of life experiment, the long discredited claims about non-functional appendix and tonsils, and the fraudulent embryo drawings from Ernest Haeckel. In essence, current biology students, aspiring medical students, and future scientists are not being taught the whole story. Rather, evidence suggests that they continue to receive incorrect and incomplete material that exaggerates the effect of random mutation and natural selection to account for DNA, the cell, or transition from species to species. And we also know from bacterial studies, there are studies about generation after generation. So many generations of bacteria are being studied, and bacteria remained a bacteria. It does not change itself into any other species. So the organism, some scientists try to reduce them to a programmed, or the information containing molecules to make it similar to a concept of mechanical, programmed machines. So that idea that there are some information molecules and there are some functional molecules, and the linear information transfer has been disproven by the evidence that Barbara McClintock and many other scientists later on they have provided, that information can also flow from the protein. And not only that, they have found that cell has a role to play in all the activities that are going on inside the cellular context. Cell can scientifically separate one reaction from another reaction, and also the read-only genomic system is being changed to read-write system. And there are many such ideas which are being reported by James Shapiro in his book Evolutionary View from 21st Century, where he has explained that smallest cells are sentient beings. Therefore, Ernest Mayr, the leading evolutionary biologist of 20th century, has given a very nice statement in his book, This is Biology. It is a little difficult to understand why the machine concept of organism could have had such long-lasting popularity. After all, no machine has ever built itself, replicated itself, programmed itself, or been able to produce its own energy. The similarity between an organism and a machine is exceedingly superficial. So we have the three field, biology, chemistry, and also physics. So we're supposed to study life in biology, and the chemistry and physics, we are supposed to address the science of matter or insentient entities, the physical sciences. So the concept of abiogenesis somehow addresses or try to explain that chemistry made a transition to biology in a primordial soup, and we could not try to understand the difference between the three phenomena: the mechanical systems, the chemical systems, and biological systems. In the mechanical systems, the unity of different parts as a machine, or even the planetary systems, which is presumed as mechanical systems, is coming from some external forces. And in the case of chemical system, the unity is coming from the chemical bonding. But in the organism, as now some of the scientists, they started to say, even the smallest cell, they exhibit sentience. So the unity is coming from the consciousness or sentience. And that is not the product of the terminology that is being used in the physics and chemistry for the entities that we are talking about, atoms, molecules, or quarks, and their corresponding parameters, pressure, temperature, or forces, for fundamental forces. From there, how this ability of knowing, thinking, or in experiencing, love, affection, all those things are coming up. That is not quite addressed in biology. So biology somehow being studied as a biology, not being given to respect to what life deserves. So here somehow the presentation yes is hiding because of the screen. How do we know something is conscious or not? So here we can see that conscious body, they violate the laws of matter. As for example, we can drop a mechanical system or release a satellite, and we can predict where it will go to certain degree of accuracy by our laws of matter that we have studied or discussed or established. But the same thing we cannot apply for a living bird. If you release a living bird, where it will go, so that is determined from its own purpose. It is not determined by the external laws. So this one important difference we can notice even by our observations, day-to-day observations. We can easily observe this. So what is consciousness? According to Bhagavad-Gita, our Vedantic understanding, it is the empirical symptom of existence of the soul. As the scientists, they are talking these days, the cell has sentience, and human to octopus, all non-human animals, they are also conscious entities. That is what Cambridge Declaration, the first Francis Crick conference, also what you can say, they come up with this Cambridge Declaration. They say that human to octopus, all non-human animals, they are also conscious entities. So what is the source of that consciousness. So that is not coming from mere explanation of atoms, molecules, or forces, or even the, in the cellular context, DNA, RNA, these are macromolecules or their combinations. This is not coming up. But what the Vedantic science or even some of the Western philosophers have expressed, that there is a concept of soul, Atman. So in Bhagavad Gita 13.34, it is told, O son of Bharata, as the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity, one within the body, illuminates the entire body by consciousness. So the concept of soul seems to be a valid argument, instead of wasting our time so much in giving molecular explanation, from where the properties that living organism exhibit in terms of subjective experiences is not coming up. So modern education does not teach us about our real nature. So our conference is on scientist can explain science, but can science explain scientist? So we are talking about so many things: atoms, molecules, planets, forces, so many things we are talking about. But we are not talking about ourselves, our real nature, as we are looking for happiness, and we all want to live, why we are dying, what is this concept of knowing, from where that capacity to know arise, and how this molecular studies, so much emphasis on matter, will help us in understanding that we are not questioning. So in past, in the educational system like Gurukula in Vedantic tradition, so they first emphasized to ask this question: who am I? Am I some atom, molecule, air, fire? What's my true nature? So this question is first being, students are encouraged to think about, and inquiry, athato brahma jigyasa, to inquire about one's true nature. So illusionary view of modern science about consciousness. Consciousness is a product of matter. This is what is being taught in a modern scientific view. So they are looking for the secret of the manifestation of consciousness in matter. But Vedantic view, the basis of all things material is consciousness, which is spiritual. Even the concept of matter that individual have, all these terms, atoms, molecules, forces, that is coming from a subject, a living being, living entity. So in the Vedantic sense, the material world is seen as the reflection of another higher reality, the spiritual world. So the conscious reality is taken as the foundation of the misconceived reality. The misconception is there. That means there is also the real conception, the true reality also exists. So the Vedantic scholars, they focused how to transcend this plane of misconception and try to explore the plane of the true reality. But at this time in our modern education, we are only trying to search, like in the biology, James Shapiro told, there is a key which is being lost in the forest. So the light is there only under the tree. So the person is searching the tree under the lamppost. Similarly, in the biology, we don't have any further explanation to understand how the consciousness arises, how these all wonderful activities that living organism is executing. That is not demonstrable by any other means. So they are only focused around DNA, some information molecules, or some brain. There must be some programmed neurons. All these ideas they are focused on. But they have to think there is some other higher reality exists, and there is some other methods are necessary to explore that higher reality than the methods that we are using to explore matter. So this dogma of modern science, that consciousness is rooted in the physics and chemistry of the brain, is refuted by the recent studies in the cellular biology, even in plant intelligence. They don't have any bacteria. They are single cell organism. They don't have any brain organ. Even the plant, it does not have any brain organ, but still they exhibit intelligent activities, which scientists are presuming they have also sentient what you can say activities. So in the Vedic tradition, the consciousness is classified in various categories, like Achadito, the covered consciousness, which is we find in the trees. So there we don't find much active activities. But when we observe in the subtle plane, they also do certain like movement oriented towards the sun, and also roots are moving towards the water, and certain activities that plants do, which also establish their sentience, but they are not so active like the other animals. So there is another types of consciousness which is termed as sankuchita, the sunken consciousness, but in the case of plants it is called as covered consciousness. And the third category is mukulito, that is the beginning of human consciousness without a sense of absolute truth. That means one can have the human body, and it can do so many things like science, art, and other things, but not about inquiry about the absolute truth, with the source of everything, and from where the entire reality came. All these things are not yet that inquiry not came. And then there is another fourth level of consciousness, which is known as Bhikachita, when man starts developing a sense of absolute truth. So he tried to inquire about the what you can say source of the reality, and the practice various things, all these religious activities. So that is known as coming under the concept of Bhikachita consciousness. And the fifth one is Purna Bhikachita, when a person had developed pure love towards the absolute truth. So there is a difference between the practitioner of religion and the person who has achieved some realization from those practices, and purified his consciousness. So these are consciousness which are being classified by the Gaudiya Vedantic Vaishnavas like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and some other traditions like yogic tradition, say they also have a classification of consciousness, like different states of consciousness they talk about, like yogic school and Advaita Vedanta school, they emphasize about Jagrita, waking state, Swapno, dreaming state, and Susupti, deep sleep or dreamless state, and the fourth one is Turiya, or the pure consciousness, a state of liberation. So Jagrita means where you have both gross body and subtle body, they are active. And Swapna means where your gross body is not active, but your subtle body, which is made of mind, intelligence, and false ego. So that is the active, not the gross body. And Susupti means deep sleep or dreamless state. So that is the plane of certain, what you can say, state of no what you can say activity of both gross and subtle body. And there is Turiya, the state of liberation they talk about. And there are different types of liberations in the Vedantic sense. So that is not we are discussing here, but this is also a classification that exists in the classification of consciousness, different states of consciousness. So Vaishnava schools have a different vision of pure consciousness. Getting one's consciousness merely free from material plane, the Turiya state or liberation, is not the ultimate destination. One must learn to act in the liberated state or become conscious of spiritual activities. So here, as we were telling, that consciousness is source of matter also. So the activities that are going on in the material world, they are considered as the perverted reflection of the real world. Like we have the bird which is flying, and its image we can see in a mirror. So this world is a perverted reflection of a real world. So what the yogis and jnanis they are trying to achieve, they're achieving the state of neutrality, means they are going to the border of this mundane and the transcendental world. But the Vaishnavas, they're not satisfied at that state. They're also exploring the activities at the plane of liberation. In the sense, the activities that we are seeing or observing in the material world, so there its real purpose is not inquired. But in the transcendental plane, all activities are centered around its true purpose. So finding the goal of life and establishing our true constitutional position, that is the focus of the Vaishnava tradition. So according to that understanding, there are different planes of reality. So different destinations, they also exist according to the different states of consciousness one can cultivate. So as we have explained, different types of consciousness like plants, animals, and in a different consciousness even in human beings. So to accommodate various material consciousness, according to Vedantic science, there are different bodies that are already existing. As Darwin, tried to propose that by accidental changes, one body transform itself into another body. So that is not the idea that the Vedantic, science accept. What it accept is that there is a transcendental or non-material soul is there in each organism. So the type of consciousness that it is cultivating, according to that, the soul can attain different bodies.
So Shanta Maharaj,
yes,
if you can please conclude in 5 minutes.
Sure. I will conclude. So there are, you can see in this diagram, there are material, planets in the lower part of this universe, and there are spiritual, planets also there in the higher part of this image, and in between there is Brahma Jyoti is there, the plane of neutrality, which is Biroja, the meeting point of mundane and transcendental. So according to the type of consciousness one is cultivating, there are also different planets where the individual can reach or attain. So this is a detailed science is there. So the life matter duality that we are observing in the material world, it is because of our polluted consciousness, and also the objects, they are also having that what you can say ignorance. So when you transcend that ignorance, and you find out your true identity as not only immortal soul, but your identity as a part of a serving being of something higher, Bhagavan, then there is another plane that you can realize or transcend. So there is a detailed science is there. So the evolution that is there in the material world, from one body to another body, that is soul transmigrating, that is known as subjective evolution in the material plane. And also souls can transmigrate in the spiritual world according to the what you can say enhancement of their consciousness. So that is known as spiritual evolution. So this is being discussed by our founder Acharya of our Math, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhardev Goswami Maharaj, in one of his book, Subjective Evolution of Consciousness. So what Vedantic science is explaining, there is evolution in the plane of consciousness, not the evolution of accidents as science try to support or find evidence based on Darwinian idea. So according to Bhakti Vedanta tradition, sir, there are different kinds of consciousness according to our attitude. The plane of dedication, and the plane of renunciation, and the plane of exploitation. So the material world is the plane of exploitation. where people, they're thinking that the objects are for my objects. I can give some explanation to it, and that should follow my models, and everything is for my satisfaction, and everything is under my ability to explain or understand. So this type of idea, self-centered idea, false self-centered idea. So some people, when they find difficulty in that type of life, from their experience, they try to renounce everything. And that is known as the plane of renunciation or tyag. And such people are focused around liberation. And as we have talked about, there is a plane of neutrality in the border of material and spiritual world. So by cultivating that type of renouncing, consciousness, they can attain to that border where there is no activity. But there is another world, that is the plane of dedication, where every unit is dedicated to a higher being or the supreme being. And for his satisfaction, everybody else is working. So that type of science is called bhakti yoga. There is a supreme master, and all the other entities, they are the energy of that supreme, and they mean to naturally serve that supreme. So according to that, the level of dedication, a level of renunciation, a level of exploitations, there are different planetary systems that I have showed before in the image. So they get different destinations. So according to Vedic science, transcendental plane has also divine variegatedness. Some people, they think that transcendental plane does not have divine variegatedness, like Mayavadis and other monists, they try to give explanation. So as we are explaining, according to Vedic science, the material world is a perverted reflection of spiritual world. So we have variegatedness in the mundane world. That means there are also variegatedness in the spiritual world. And that is quite logical. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. B. Niskama Shanta Maharaj, for your wonderful presentation and wonderful talk. As we understood something from the presentation, that living things are amazing, and to distinguish between the non-life and life, it is not depend only on the in scientific way. It is also it is essential, or it is need to understand the level of consciousness, and with some higher help, we can elevate our consciousness. Only then we can understood the higher things. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Shanta. Now, session is open for some questions from the audience.
There are some comments in the chat from Stephanie Go.
Yes, there are some.
I'm not sure if she would like to ask them in person, or if she would just like us to address what she has written already. She asked first for clarification about cellular consciousness and collective consciousness. She asked clarification about that, I think, between the individual and the collective levels of how the cognitive activity of cells. That was her first question. And then a second question she posted, consciousness comes from not only observing but reacting. So her second question seems to be about the function of consciousness as a passive observer and the function as an active agent choosing to engage with reality or to engage with the environment in a certain kind of way. And so this question she put during Dr. Shanta's talk. So she was asking for clarification and how the active agent makes those decisions and how one can know the truth based on that activity, or how one governs such decisions based on the truth that they are exposed to, and how that's related to the soul. So that seems to be the questions that Stephanie Franco has asked through the chat. If I got anything wrong, please feel free to correct me.
So as far as I understand, in the concept of knowledge or knowing, so it is generally believed in the modern context that we can know, actually. So that idea is not, very much, what you can say, supported, in the sense that we are finite and reality in front of is something infinite. So even many finite beings together collecting, a lot of information and knowledge, they cannot understand the infinite reality that is there in front of us to explore. So the Vedic idea is that the knowledge has to descend. The aggressive approach of knowing things, there is some always defect is there, because there is no surrender is involved. So thus we are trying to give our own misconceived ideas. We are trying to represent the reality with that. Like the blind man is trying to understand the elephant with pillar and wall and snake and rope and things like that. So what is a very sentient reality that is there in front of us, we are trying to reduce it to our misconceived ideas in the form of machines and chemicals and all those things. But to understand the concept, the reality, the sentient reality, and the reality which is in its true essence, then some higher knowledge has to descend. And for that, we have to change our attitude. So in Vedic science, attitude and knowledge, they are very much related. So the egocentric understanding of reality, that is always defective. So the Bhagavad-Gita and other scriptures, they explain about the concept of surrender and purification of the senses, all these things. With our defective senses and defective mind, defective intellect, we cannot understand these things. So there is certain practices which are being suggested, and we have to also learn these things from a qualified teacher. Like we are trying to learn this all terminology, quarks, atoms, molecules from teacher. So to understand the way of receiving the higher knowledge, we have to also go to a qualified teacher who is well versed with that Shabda Praman, or who is expert in getting that higher knowledge, the process of understanding or connecting to that. So we are saying that we are thinking that we are subject and reality, something in front of is in our object. So this is the way we are trying to study everything, but we are not thinking there is some supreme subject to whom we are also object. And like Hegel has explained, subjective consciousness and objective consciousness. Subjective consciousness means every finite being can give his own idea about reality, and that is very personal for him. But the reality is in front of us is not our property or our object. There is some supreme being which is being termed as supreme absolute, and those are his object, and to see from his angle of vision everything, and that is same for everybody, and that is the true reality. So how to approach to that, as Hegel also explained, and some other philosophers also explained, And in our Vedic tradition, this is also explained. The epistemology has to be, deeply studied. In Vedic epistemology, there is pratyaksha, paraksha, aparoksha, adakshaja, aprakrita. All these things are there. The sense-based knowledge, and the knowledge which is coming from some other inferences, and coming from the meditative process, and beyond that, adakshaja, descending from above. Which is not under our control. We can go on to only up to our own self by our meditative or introspective process. But to go beyond ourself, the higher knowledge, that is not within our capacity. That has to descend. And there is another very higher plane, a prakrita level, not mundane, but looks like mundane. So these all levels are there. To understand that, we have to also spend some time, as we spend so much time in studying matter, so many years of research. So some time has to be also given towards this.
Since there's only about 2 more minutes left in the Q&A session, one more nice question just came from Devahuti Devi Dasi, and she asked, does consciousness grow from one level to another while the body is growing? Or is it dormant and comes to light when we develop our mind? But we only have a couple more minutes, only about 2 more minutes in this session.
Yes. Actually, when the embryological development is happening, so there also it is being told, when the Jivatma is getting, its consciousness as a, body as a dog or a frog, that is there in the embryo at what stage, and the child has its own mind, and the baby body is there, and the mind, intellect and ego, they are different, of course, and in the youth stage, the mind, intellect, ego are different, and in the old age, the mind, intellect, ego are different. That is clearly explained in Bhagavad Gita. Dehino yasmi yatha dehe komaram yoganam jara tatha dehantara prapti dhiratatta namayate. So the subtle body is carrying the soul from one gross body to another gross body. Of course, the consciousness is changing as the gross body is changing. But to change our consciousness really, like the soul in the frog body, to get the consciousness of the fish. So some association with the other consciousness is necessary. So the association plays a crucial role in changing one's consciousness from higher to lower or lower to higher. So there is, the association of sadhu sangha, asat sangha, sat sangha. These are all, mentioned. So our association can change our consciousness.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maharaj, for your nice, profound explanation. The question, and now we proceed towards our next speaker.